agenda. I think Kathy left, but John has joined us. Hi, John.
Hello. Morning, everyone.
What did I do with my agenda? Okay. So did anybody want to talk about that at all or ask any questions or anything, or we're just moving on?
That's a lot of information. I know he's asking for support, which with HCR 132. Just out of curiosity, is that something HACDACS can do? Is to provide testimony and?
Well, the resolution has already been delivered in final form, so I don't think it needs to be resurrected next year. It's already in final form. Now it's it's going to be delivered, as he mentioned, to all of the congressional delegation and to the different parties that were noted on the reso. So, but I think your venue here is, to make that to discuss this and to make recommendations through the annual report. So I don't think additional testimony is needed.
Yeah, I think we're too late this year, I think. But I do think commentary in the annual report may, have some impact for, what it's worth on the Department of Health acting on this, possibly the governor, making it happen at the final end. We would want to avoid a situation like he described in Iowa where it all goes through and then the governor just doesn't do anything with it. And I think other case scenario is, as he described, if the Department of Health does not end up following through on the resolution and it actually becomes a bill next year, our commentary in the annual report can, be useful in that setting as well. Mm-hmm. So it's interesting because it seems like a fairly straightforward thing. Like the process doesn't sound straightforward, but the principle doesn't sound. I'm having a really hard time understanding why people would be so opposed. And, that I think that happens to me a lot. But even with his explanation, it doesn't make a lot of sense to me where the opposition is coming from. It sounds like this is sort of a win-win and gaining control, helping people, and doesn't really seem to have a ton of negative side effects, except for maybe the work involved in making it happen. Did anyone have any other thoughts on why there might be hesitation or hold up to actually do it?
I just, I agree with you that after that whole conversation, I was like, so where we are, what, and was it? And it raised kind of more questions and answers in some ways for me. Yeah. So I'm not exactly, I didn't know what direction he was going to go in because I've had a number of conversations with him. But I don't know if I've even talked about that particular resolution with him before. So, so there was a lot of information he provided, and it sounds like it's going to provide some solutions that makes our system work better as far as the medical, but one thing I want to know from him, maybe I'll follow up with him and I can share the answer, was kind of who else, besides maybe some legislators, who else is in his, whether it's a coalition or whatever, who else supports this? And who opposes it? And is it just the opposing the unknown? Is it just the Attorney General and some others opposing this unknown thing? And who is for it and why?
Because it's a lot of the things he said made it sound like even the dispensaries would benefit with sort of the banking practices and sort of a safer scenario. So
they wouldn't though, right? I mean, the option to do banking or to do all your transactions in cash, right? I think like some people would think, yeah, banking, of course, but maybe there's other things that are motivating them to keep everything in cash, or there's just accustomed to that system. And so a change, and I think that's what happens, is that people think about, oh, is this a change? And what would it do? And just the fear that comes around with change. And so that's why I'm thinking, like, well, maybe, because that's, I'm thinking, why do people oppose this, right? I mean, is it lack of confidence in the medical marijuana program itself? There's, I mean, it's pretty easy. You can go to a doctor, tell them you have anxiety, I need some medical marijuana. They're like, okay, go register. And then, yeah, you can grow your plants at home. You can go to a dispensary. There's not much oversight on this right now. We get clients that come in. I'm like, how did you get a medical marijuana card? How'd you get your green card? And they're all like joke about it. They're like, oh yeah, go to this one doctor, and so I think that there's things around that on the ground level that maybe has influenced people's perspective and opinions about the program. I mean, he's on a different level. I mean, I've never heard of a doctor that was like, no, I follow up with my patients. I actually don't recommend the marijuana. But it's their choice, and blah, 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 blah. Like, that is not a normal conversation that I've had with other medical providers, or with clients who go and the way they talk about their medical provider. So I think that there's probably a lot of that, just misinformation. And so when you're asking to support a program that is broken, there's gaps in it, it's kind of like, well, okay, there's the people that are going to jump on board and they're like, yes, we need to make this better. There's people that are like, oh, it's such a mess, I don't even want to touch it. Like, it's moving along now, let's just leave it as it is. And I think that's, there may be some of that, like, well, how much investment is this going to take? Like, oh my gosh, it's such an enormous task to untangle all of this. The dispensaries aren't going to want the doctors to have influence on their business, right? To come and say, no, this is an actual dosage and this is the information you have to give out. No, I want to make my sale. So there's conflict there. I don't know. That's kind of what I've kind of was thinking about and swishing around in my head. But
well, it sounded like, he said, in its ideal state, a medical marijuana kind of industry in Hawaii could be really significant. And, I mean, there could be, he said, like when he was talking about initially, in year 2000, when it was designed and stuff, it could be, I mean, with the cancer center and everything else there, I mean, there's potential real opportunity for cannabis, pharmaceutical research, and really business and commerce. But I think when he said, now we have, what is it, 9 or 12 different dispensaries all operating on cash, he goes, it's, who are they and who wants to be in that business anyways? And he was kind of questioning a little bit are these guys on the up and up? And I think a lot of them probably are just waiting in the wings for legalization so they can flip that switch and just boom. And I don't know if you all know this, but a lot of the investment in the stocks and the other big marijuana industry, it's by Altria and other tobacco interests that have been behind Philip Morris and stuff like that. So one of the big things in the legislature this year is, what are we going to do with this tobacco settlement money? Can we free it up and stuff? And why do we even have that money? Is because Philip Morris lied to us and they said doctors smoke cigarettes because it makes them healthier and makes them feel better. And now we have basically those guys coming in again from the left side in marijuana, investing there and just looking for another big payoff. And people are going, well, we should just tax it and legalize it and let it go. And one of my concerns was legislators and others saying, why should this bill, talking about a legalization bill, why should this bill go to the Committee on Health first? And I was like, we're talking about legalizing a drug. Shouldn't that be the first question? Shouldn't we have the health question answered first? Then if the health question can satisfactorily be answered, then we go to the commerce part of it and taxing it and how we can do it safely versus, well, it's out there, so let's just go ahead and do it and let's see how much money we can make off of it.
From sort of a big picture view, what I really took away from this is that despite us calling it medical cannabis, the cannabis system is not, even in this setting, is not really medicalized. It's not treated or acting or the commerce of, like, none of it's actually medical. It's like this weird in between from sort of a free market product and a medicalized system. And this is somewhere in the middle. And the way I took it away is he believes that the conflict between the federal law and the state law, and that he described so nicely, is sort of at the core of why it's medical cannabis is sitting in this weird in-between space. And the weird in-between space is leading to not only like not really appropriate or maybe safe usage, but also some of the weird production side of it and selling, some of the unsavory practices on the other side. So that was sort of the bigger takeaway picture that I got from it. And I think it's interesting. And I wonder if trying to make cannabis more medicalized would actually help the scenario. And that was some of the things he described, like the need for formal guidelines from the medical board about how you certify someone and what the doctor-patient relationship is like. And, even the idea of having the state or some, state certified entity actually making the products for medical use, in a way you would have them make Prozac for medical use, or, a sort of legit pharmaceutical creation that's standardized and tested. And I know that the state does a little supervision of testing of some of the products, but it's very haphazard and I don't think very rigorous. So I'm curious if something like getting that DEA exemption he described would really solve those problems, or if that's just the first step and then you actually need Department of Health to actually act. That was sort of the takeaway that I got from the bigger picture, but
yeah,
it's fascinating.
Yeah, and I think like as Hawaii should be considering how to diversify its own economy, right? And so, the medical world could be like, this could be a really good area to kind of expand on till we have a diversified economic system rather than just relying on tourism.
Yeah.
And from a Medicaid perspective, I know I came in late. I missed most of this presentation, but just hearing you folks talk around the issue and the legalization and all that. I mean, Diana, what you were saying, it's almost like there needs to be more rigor around just if you have a prescription, what are you going to get? What is I mean, I think of any other prescription that we pay for Medicaid, right? It's you folks know, we talk about Prozac, right? So okay, what's the form, what's the dosage, and there's a NDC attached to it, and sometimes it's HIPIC. So there's that rigor around sort of formalizing and from a doctor perspective, you're a physician or prescriber, you're like, okay, you write the script out for Prozac, right? And you send it to whatever the patient's chosen pharmacy is. So it's not a thing that you sort of question or you're not sure about, right? Because there's that rigor around, there's a lot of regulation around the drugs and the manufacturing and distribution and all that stuff, right? And conflict of interest and all that, the drug reps and all that stuff. There's a lot of oversight around on that whole industry. So for better or for worse. So, but yeah, so when you think about, okay, this is another drug, we're going to have someone prescribed, then there seems to be a lot of like immaturity in the industry, just from okay, it's going to be something that physicians start prescribing, right? It's going to be something that they start writing on their prescription pad, right? It doesn't sound like there's like that. There needs to be, rules and regulations around, sort of standardized units. I mean, I don't know, right? Because you could buy from one manufacturer to grower to another grower, and you could get something different. I mean, I don't know, right? It's a plant, right? In the end, it's a plant. So so that's that's the thing that's throwing my head around, like it, and that might be maybe there's sort of questions and resistance to it. It's like, well, at some point, if this treating this equivalent to a Prozac, then you have that confidence that what you're going to prescribing is what you're going to the patient's going to be getting, right, for use twice a day or twice a week or whatever it is, right? So to me, that's sort of like, it sounds like there's still that question around that structure, the infrastructure around the industry, and how does that, you have to get to that point before you can start sort of interfacing, I think, with just the regular medical delivery and prescribing system. So yeah, just, I mean, I didn't hear all the pros. It sounds like there was a lot of great pros and from a use perspective and a medical perspective. So, but yeah, just thinking from the the business side, yeah, it's a business side, right? It's how do you sort of formalize this and mature this business and industry into something where medical professionals around the state can have confidence in what they're doing and what they're prescribing and what the patient would get.
Yeah, I think you hit it exactly on, John, and that's kind of what I mean about sort of it not really being fully medicalized, in that it there's not that consistency. And one of the suggestions he made was that down the line we need sort of formal guidelines on how it should be used, and that should be coming from the medical board. And he came up with the suggestion that there's someone in Hawaii that's making FDA quality products for this with regulated dosages, and that what kind of dosage the patient needs for which indications, and that in that setting, if you had it all organized enough, you might even be able to get insurance coverage for it if it was formalized enough in the right setting. And I think that's probably where we need to go if in an ideal world, but the problem I think is getting there is very opaque, I think.
Yeah. This is Jared. So I think listening into the discussion, it's funny. The one thing that went through my mind was methadone. And one of the things, and the reason I thought of methadone is I look at the decades of research behind it. And when we were first starting out, I think there was a question of how effective is it going to be? And there was research done over and over and over again. And what I hear you saying is medicalizing it. I think the idea is really getting it to the point where people understand exactly how medically something is going to be used. And I agree, I'm concerned too, that I feel like the business part is really pushing the needle. And I'm concerned about, the intent. As a clinician, I always want to go medically, what do we know? And how is this going to be understood and prescribed ultimately for the benefit? Because there are number of substances that have side effects, can be harmful if misused. On the other hand, there may be beneficial properties. And that's the thing I'm just not quite sure of yet. As much as I appreciate the presentation, I feel like I want to hear from more sources.
All right. Well, are we ready to move on? We can obviously continue this discussion, and I'm sure we'll have more to discuss on the topic when we get to the report writing and stuff, but there's a lot of really interesting issues there. Mm-hmm. So if anyone doesn't have it, if we're good to move on, we can go ahead and see if, John, do you have any ADAT or legislative updates for us?
Very few, but anyway, as you know, 4 governor's messages reappointing 3 members as well as 1 new member to the commission were heard on March 31st. Looks like all the GMs moved ahead with the recommendation to advisory consent. So we're tracking those. I'm waiting to see the word confirmed. And the other one is, I don't have any Hawaii Opioid Initiative updates, but I'm sure you all are all aware by now, but Hawaii Cares has a new clinical director, Leocadia Conlon. She has a PhD, for those of you who do not know, a PhD in translational health sciences from George Washington University and an MPH from Johns Hopkins with a concentration in global health and maternal child health. And she served as a physician's assistant in Virginia, Maryland, and Hawaii. So her experience includes expertise in hepatology, reproductive health, maternal child health, extensive experience in mental health, chronic disease management in uninsured/underinsured populations, was involved in clinical trials research, overseeing quality improvement initiatives, and experience as a director of clinical services for a free medical clinic. So she has a commitment to addressing health disparities and promoting health equity, which is something we have been continually asked about, and how do we address. So it's an ongoing challenge for us. But that's it for ADAD updates. Any
Will you repeat her
questions?
name real quick?
Sure, it's Leocadia, Leocadia Conlon, Conlon. I can find her email address and then send it to you if you like.
Yeah. Do you think, I mean, we had talked about doing a CARES update as for one of our meeting presentations. Do you think we could get her to come talk to HACDACS?
Sure. If we can let her know what sorts of topics you're interested in, maybe she can bring a team, one or two of her, with her, because she's still new, acclimating to the position. And as you're aware, HACDACS, the Hawaii Cares is looking to try to more integrate the substance use and the mental health functions along with its crisis functions. So, but I can definitely give us some ideas.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, I would love to hear just how they're planning to do that integration. I think that would be fantastic. But does it make more sense maybe to invite her to like the June meeting or something, just to give her a little time to settle in, rather than asking her to come, in a month? It'd be a couple months out.
Sure, I can plant.
John, when
ask her
did
to
you
serve
start?
I believe she started around early April. I'm not sure the exact date, but yeah.
Who did she replace?
She replaced Catherine Boyer, who is now part of RISE.
And she would replace Cliff.
No, Clifford was the principal investigator, because
Okay.
it's a UH crew predominantly, and so Victoria Fan is the new PI.
Okay, so she's still there.
So Victoria's still there, and now Leocadia has taken Catherine Boyer's place.
Okay, so that sounds good for a June speaker. Did we have thoughts on what people are interested in hearing about in May?
Might be good. I think we talked about maybe Dr. Hanning.
Yeah, I'm still trying to nail him down, so to speak, and see if he will be able to present to us. And Jared, this one would be really interesting for you. More on the clinical, well, all of us, but because Dr. Hanning is now, he's the new president of ASAM, and in late 2020, they have a new policy statements on cannabis. And previously their policy statement on legalization of cannabis was similar to most other medical groups like the AMA and AAP, pediatricians, et cetera, which was, we understand the reasons for decriminalization. We think that should happen if done properly in order to not, affect, minority communities, et cetera. But we kind of oppose legalization for the health of the kids or whoever else. And this time the ASAM is, they didn't kind of directly oppose legalization so much, but it is, it's a really robust statement, and it's kind of long, but it's very readable even for someone like me, where they kind of address topic by topic, impaired driving, substitute for opioids, a lot of the different issues. And they kind of say, this is where we stand on this because of this, and here's all our documentation and research that supports our position. So it's very good. And I just think since he's the president of ASAM, it'd be great to have him here. And it would be probably a completely different discussion than what we had today. But it would, and he's a completely different person anyways, but I think it'd be really good if we can get him to present to us. He said he was on HACDACS back when I think George Washington was president or something like that. I don't know.
But I believe, having his presentation will generate additional perspective around today's discussion.
Yeah, so I'll see if I can nail him down.
Sounds great.
The date is, what is it, John? May date?
The next May meeting is scheduled for May 25th.
Okay.
And then the June meeting is June 22nd.
Okay. Yeah, I
Okay.
think that would be a great complimentary presentation, and just wonderful to hear about the statement and sort of his thoughts on.
Yeah.
I think we can come up with a list of questions. Personally, I'd be very interested in his opinion on legalization, but also particularly interested on viewpoint on cannabis use for opioid use disorder. I think that's sort of a fascinating topic that I don't think has been completely sorted yet. So it would be very interesting to hear an expert talk about it.
And then regarding the earlier question on who's for, who's against, maybe what I could do is take a look and try to find the four other bills that today's presenter talked about as having been introduced this session and will most likely be resurrected next session, and looking at the different testimony who testified for or against and why.
Sounds good.
Tommy Chong, I think, testified for it. Someone knows who Tommy Chong is. Thank you, John.
I'm laughing over here too. Great. Well, it sounds like we have a pretty good plan. Anybody have any other issues or needs or things to bring up?
I can go give a quick Medicaid